Since the golden years of arcade cabinets and joysticks, Bandai Namco has been one of the most popular fighting game developers in our time. From the recently released Dragon Ball FighterZ to the classic Tekken franchise, the fighting game fans have always had something to get their blood flowing. However, if you haven't played either of the latter, you've probably gotten your hands on Soulcalibur. For almost 25 years, Soulcalibur has translated swords, axes, and hula hoops into a stunning and heart-pounding fighting game. Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Throughout the 90s, fighting games were at the height of their prime with titles like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and of course, Namco's own Tekken. However, Namco was ready for something different, something new that fighting games hadn't done before: weapons combat. And so, the development team known as Project Soul began production on a brand new fighting game that would incorporate melee weapons rather than the standard flying fists and kicks. As with any fighting game, programming and animations would prove to be a challenge, especially since this would be the first game ever to utilize passive optical motion capture. This is a method designers use to measure light reflection and grayscale in a digital space. So, if you remember seeing characters with weird white squares on them, it was probably because developers used this. Soul Edge, or Soul Blade, released in arcades in December 1995, making its way onto Sony's PlayStation a year later. The game received praise for its stunning graphics, roster of unique fighters, and its surprisingly solid story mode, which was, and continues to be, an often half-baked portion of fighting games. That isn't to say that the game was perfect. Even Namco had quickly recognized the problems within Soul Edge's design. The fighters were pretty unbalanced, and the movement felt awkward.
I never had such an easy victory.
Luckily, the Soul Edge team got a hold of an internal prototype that would benefit their next project. This prototype used a movement system known as the 8-way run system, allowing the user to easily maneuver in a 3D environment. With these new improvements and innovations, the team felt this was enough to warrant a title change. Soulcalibur hit the arcades on July 30th, 1998, with the Dreamcast version launching 13 months later. Contrary to the commercial failures Dreamcast has been infamous for, Soulcalibur managed to sell over 1 million copies, making it the console's second biggest selling game. Critics gave it glowing reviews, citing the beautiful character models, tight controls, and replayability.
Battle 1, fight!
With the success of Soulcalibur, Project Soul knew it was time to get started on a sequel. Like many games around this time, Soulcalibur 2 wouldn't change much in formula, but would add some new surprises in its content. Soulcalibur 2 would feature 3 guest fighters, placing one on each console. GameCube owners would get to play as Link from Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda series. As for PlayStation 2, the original plan was to include Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. Unfortunately, the plan fell through during production, and Heihachi Mishima from the Tekken franchise would take his place. Oh, and Xbox owners got Spawn. Wah wah.
I'll crush you.
Surprisingly enough, this would kickstart what is now a series tradition. Soulcalibur 2 would make its way to arcades in 2002 while launching on consoles in 2003. Needless to say, fans and critics were ecstatic. Thanks to its meaty roster, extravagant settings, and enjoyable game modes, Soulcalibur 2 became a must-own. Besides, freaking Link was in it. Once again, the fans demanded more, and Project Soul was ready to give it to them with Soulcalibur 3. Although, during development, things got a little weird in the rumor mill. For starters, it was reported that Dante from Capcom's Devil May Cry series would appear as a guest fighter. Sadly, this would not go as planned. It was also rumored that Soulcalibur 3 would launch as a PlayStation 2 exclusive, which was odd to some considering Soulcalibur 2 was a multi-platform title. Nevertheless, Soulcalibur 3 saw positive reviews at launch, albeit not as good as its predecessors. While critics and fans adored the inclusion of an intricate character creation mode and the critically polarizing single-player campaign, Soulcalibur 3 faced criticism for failing to include an online mode, something that many of Namco's competitors were already doing. The game did come out in 2005 after all.
You're not bad, but I don't like the look in your eyes.
Success for the franchise continued into the next generation of consoles. Soulcalibur 4 would release on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in July 2008. This time around, the character creation was deeper, and the Tower of Souls mode kept players engaged with its laundry list of challenges. What threw everyone off was the inclusion of Star Wars characters. Both consoles would share Starkiller from the Force Unleashed games, but Darth Vader and Yoda would be console exclusives to PS3 and Xbox 360 respectively. To make matters worse, these characters saw some major design problems, the most notable one being Yoda, who was immune to throws because of his short stature.
Stage completed.
Strong you are, with the Force.
Despite these complaints, Soulcalibur IV was still just as good as 3, but it wasn't as good as the older titles. At least it didn't forget the online mode this time. Things took a nosedive in the next few years. Fans were eager to see Soulcalibur return to form. Was there any hope when Namco unveiled Soulcalibur V? The answer to that, Mojo players, will depend on who you ask. It wasn't going to be a game changer by any stretch of the imagination. Yet, when you look at the troubled development history of Soulcalibur V, the only word that could cross your mind was ambitious. Project Soul had plans for new characters, with each of them having their own unique story mode. The game would also incorporate modern fighting game traditions, forcing players to rely on meter usage to pull off devastating attacks or successful blocks. Soulcalibur V launched in North America on January 31st, 2012. While the reviews were far from scathing, it didn't stop fans from naming it the worst in the series. Well, assuming we aren't including any spin-offs. Fans were unhappy with how the game aimed more towards competitive esports players. To make matters worse, the game was filled with entirely new faces, shutting out veteran players yearning to see their favorite fighters. Game director Daishi Odashima revealed that barely 1/4 of the original story mode made it into the final product.
I hunger for your soul!
Many players cited the story mode as the worst part of Soulcalibur V. 5 years later, Bandai Namco and Project Soul announced Soulcalibur VI during the 2017 Game Awards. Over the past year, fans have been eager to see their favorite warriors make their way to the current generation. Amidst our excitement, the future of Soulcalibur all depends on this title. If it fails, this could be the last time we see the likes of Sophitia, Mitsurugi, and company. Regardless, if this will truly be the final Soulcalibur game, the franchise will never be forgotten. As we continue clashing blades with friends, the soul shall forever burn inside us all.
My abyss shall take you! Wisdom of age.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.